Hi guys, this is Resident of Collinwood for YouTube. I'm live streaming for the first time. I've never done this. I'm here to talk to Jamison Collins and his father, Edward Collins. Just like in 1966, we have Edward Collins, who's played by Lewis Edmonds. So we know Roger was played by Lewis Edmonds. We had that Roger Collins was played by Lewis Edmonds. David Collins was played by David Hennessy. We have Jamison being played by David Hennessy. So these two actors are used to playing father and son. They've done it before, and they're doing it here in this, the 1897 storyline. So what are the differences? I think the biggest difference is that we know that Jamison is the father of Elizabeth and Roger. David, we haven't had a chance to see David all grown up or hear about David being grown up and having kids yet. We haven't had that opportunity in Dark Shadows from a canon sense. I think that's the one big difference so far. The other big difference, obviously, being the time periods, 1897 and 1966. Now, was there a relationship difference? On the surface, Edward does Edward hate his son? No. I would say that's one of the big differences is that I never got the sense that Edward hated Jamison, where Roger hated David and David hated Roger. They just did not like each other. They just, did not care for one another. And David tries to kill Roger. I mean, there's no other way around that. And then there's Jamison and Edward. Now, you have Jamison does get a governess, just like David. There is that similarity. The difference, I would say, is with Jamison's governess. Jamison's governess is actually recruited by his dad, by Edward, where David's governess, Victoria Winters, isn't. Victoria Winters is brought to Collinwood by Elizabeth, as we all know. And we have this these great moments of these governesses coming. Are they both orphans? Yes. Rachel was left by her parents at the Worthington Hall, which is a school run by the cruel Gregory Trask. He's very cruel to the kids. He's very disciplined to them. And then you have David and Victoria Winters, I meant to say, who is raised in a foundling home. And she has Miss Hopewell, who's very nice to her. With Jamison Collins, Jamison, like David, had an idol. Now, we can get into the debate of what was David really Roger's son. I'll get into that here in a second. But David's idol is Burke Devlin. He looks up to Burke. He talks to Burke. Burke is his best friend. With Jamison, we can legit say his idol is, well, really two people. He had many adults in his life, but primarily it's Quentin. Quentin is this playboy who, really, really gets any woman he wants. And David really looks up to Quentin. He admires the way he lives. He just respects the hell out of him. But the one key difference here is where David's somewhat cruel to Victoria, Jamison is not cruel to either Beth, and really him and Rachel get along pretty well. I will say they do pull a small little trick on her, but it's nothing that heavy. It's not. I think we saw David put Vicky through more hell than what Rachel got from Jamison. Jamison was more adolescent. Um, I will say that when we have Jamison possessed by Count Batofe, that's where things really get heavy for Edward, because here's his son who is possessed. Now we have a moment where we always wondered, did Roger really care about his own son? And that moment finally comes to fruition with the Phoenix arc. Before 1897 started, we first see Roger give a shit during the Phoenix arc. You have Roger reading what happened to the young boy, how he got burned. He didn't want to leave the fire, and the boy looked like David. This here, I believe his name was David too. This here really upsets Roger. Really, you can see how much he cares for his son here. Now, there's no denying that Jamison is the son of Edward. So Edward's son is Jamison. There's no denying that. Now, with David, is his dad Roger? Is it Burke? It's a question that is really, really, from a standpoint, you could go either way. I mean, here's what I'll say. When you get into the Phoenix arc of the 1966 storyline, does it matter who his father is? No, not really, because it's not like Laura. Remember, Laura isn't just using Roger. She's using Burke too. She's playing both sides. So it really doesn't matter who the father is. She just wants her kid. She just wants her kid so she can take him away to that special place. And no, I don't mean Silent Hill. So you have this really, really interesting contrast between David and Roger and Jamison and Edward. Now, the other big difference is Jamison and Edward have to deal with a Reverend Gregory Trask. And Trask is somebody who takes Rachel. The kids end up going to Worthington Hall anyway. This is something that does not happen with David. David does not get sent away. And the reason David doesn't get sent away is because of Victoria Winters, number one. And number two, really, Elizabeth. I mean, Elizabeth Collins Stoddard, who is the matriarch of the Collins family, she puts her foot down. She loves her nephew. She is the end all to be all at Collinwood. When it pertains to Jamison, he gets sent to Worthington Hall because there's just a lot going on at Collinwood. And his mother has shown up. She wants, she wants her son. It gets really interesting in 1897 because Laura Collins goes full on burning Worthington Hall to prove how far she'll go to get her son, um, and Nora, her daughter. Now, there's a lot of questions when it pertains to the Jamison Nora thing, and one of the big questions is did one of the kids die prior to Barnabas coming back? Because with Nora, with Jamison and his sister Nora, could have one of them have died? Sure. We don't know if one did prior to Barnabas coming back, or that get changed by Barnabas going back in time? Probably. And according to Angelique, the longer Barnabas is there, the more he'll change things, and not necessarily for the better. And some things he doesn't change for the better, actually. Some people end up getting killed. With Jamison and Edward's complex relationship, the biggest complexity is Edward wants Jamison to do one thing: grow up. But here's the thing. Jamison does grow up. Jamison has a lot of great examples, really. You might not think Quentin's a good example, but in many ways he is. He's an example of, yes, you don't want to necessarily be a Quentin Collins, but you also have to know how to treat a woman. You also have to know how to talk to a woman, what her wants and needs are. There are things you can learn from a Quentin Collins, but there are also things you can learn from Edward too, such as high society living, the polite manners, the things that Edward wants Jamison to learn, and Jamison does learn those things. When it comes to Judith Collins, does Judith teach Jamison anything? I think the one thing Judith teaches Jamison most is, and Jamison learns this as well, people aren't who they seem to be. And really the biggest lesson that is learned by this is Gregory Trask. And really, Count Patofe too. I mean, Fitzgibbons, anybody? So you really have what Judith getting married to Gregory Trask, the Reverend Gregory Trask, who's also a teacher and a principal. He sees that this man who married his aunt is not a good person, and he learns this. He also knows that Quentin Collins, though his uncle, isn't always the nicest person. Yes, he is funny, he is loving, but there's a dark side to Quentin. But there's also a bright side. Also, one of the great things about Jamison and Edward's relationship is, though Edward is strict with the kids, he does care about them. Remember the fire in the room when the door's locked and Barnabas and Edward are outside the door. Edward's pretty frantic. He's trying to get in the door, and Barnabas says, "Go get the axe." And Barnabas sneaks in the door, and he has to rescue the kids, and does. And that's what causes really Edward to start asking all sorts of questions. With that being said, you have now a caring father who worried about his son and his daughter. Their lives were in danger in a burning room. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing to see from Edward Collins. We do see Roger care about David, but in a different way. He doesn't want him to get hurt by the Phoenix. Where we really see Roger get concerned is prior to 1897 and how possessed David has become. It really frightens Roger. Yes, Roger does care about his son. I also think, too, with Jamison, you get the sense of why and I want to give a shout out. Patrick McRae is right. Jamison really did care for Beth. I mean, he named one of his daughters Elizabeth. Patrick's right. He's 1000% right. You really have this whole thing going on where here's Beth, who really loves Quentin. Jamison is not blind. Here's where I'll say Jamison really grows up here, really becomes the adult. And you can sort of see the man he's going to become, really, in these scenes. When he's confronting Quentin with hurting Beth, with hurting Beth's feelings. This isn't, you can say it's just Jamison being childish. I don't think so. This is Jamison being the adult. Jamison being the adult he's going to become. And knowing that hurting the person you love is wrong. And that is something. It really is. Well, I don't see anybody. You guys could have chatted. I don't see anybody in the chat, so I was hoping to get some people. This is my first live stream. I didn't know how this was going to go. I really didn't. I'll try to schedule these for Sunday night, and hopefully we'll get some people on, and you guys can talk Dark Shadows with me. It's really a fun discussion. I will say this on the close of Jamison and Edward is that though the same two actors who played, Roger and David ended up playing Jamison and Edward, they weren't the same characters. They really weren't. There's the really big difference between Edward and Roger and Jamison and David. And you can really get that between 1897 and the 1966 beginning episodes. And it's really, really well done. I was trying to also kill some time to see if anybody would come in here. But no. All right, guys. I hope you enjoyed this. Hopefully we'll have a little more interaction. You guys have a great night.